Oh, he's on mute.
Mute, Davo.
I'm not mute. Anyway, we're back now. Yes, guys, you know what time is. It's your boy David at the Irish Hotspur, Ireland's #1 Spurs fan, also in the mud right now. But guys, welcome back to Tottenham Weekly. Thank you so much for everyone tuning in. We've got a good panel here of delectable guests for you today. We have co-host Jack Kinnicky. How are you, Jacko?
Keeping well, Dave. We're going to try to fit in some sort of, conversation before this Champions League about the Tottenham Hotspur. Some interesting sort of things to discuss, the likes of maybe a midfield that has to be questioned, and as well, maybe could we find ourselves in a similar director of football situation that we did last time under Nuno? And looks like we have a debut. Dara, haven't met you before, but pleased to meet you. Good to see you.
Nice to meet you too, lads. Yeah, pleasure to be on here.
He was over at the Palace game at the weekend. Tell everyone about your record, my man.
Yeah, I'm telling you now, I know obviously I'm based in Ireland as well, so I was over 5 games this season, won all 5, so it must be a bit of lucky Irish charm there or something. I don't know what it is, but it's been a good year.
Get that man a season ticket. Get him a season ticket.
Have him take Dave's spot. Yeah.
What a record. What a record. I was only saying I need to start going to games with him and his father if they're going to have a record like that.
More than welcome, man. 100%.
Yeah. But that's Dara from Spurs Views, so everybody big up Dara in the comments. We are also joined by the one and only Sim from We Are Tottenham TV. Sim, how are you keeping, my man?
Big up, everyone. Thanks for having me on again, Dave. Yeah, I'm doing all right, man. Doing all right. Look, we're all in better spirits after a victory and a clean sheet. So, look, and Brighton losing yesterday, that top 6, all of a sudden, looking like there's a bit of potential there. So, I'm glad to be on. Cheers. Thanks for having me on, man.
And, of course, Europa League final is in Dublin next season. So, bring on that Europa League. Yeah, I need that. Saucy seeing Tottenham up in the Aviva. That'll be nice. And of course, we are joined by the one and only Sean from Spurs Talk. So, Shawnee boy, how you keeping, my man?
Good, mate. Good. Always happy to be here. And thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on, my man. I really do appreciate it. So, guys, there's your delectable panel introduced to you. I'm going to hand over to the one and only Jacko now to take it away. We are going to use the boys' best time. And, of course, I think we all want to be off for that Champions League semi-final tonight. So we're going to waste no time and get straight into it. If you do like the stream, make sure you smash that like button throughout. Let's get it over 100 likes. Also, feel free to smash that subscribe button and feel free to get in your super chats and show support for the channel. But most importantly, get your comments, stand out, interact with us, and get a good discussion off the back of it. Jacko, over to you, my man.
Shawnee, it's been a while since we've had you here on these Tuesday shows, so I'll go to you first. And I think you might have a decent answer on this one. Are Spurs fans maybe too quick to write off new signings and maybe not give them long enough of a chance? I think you could use Emerson, right, as an example of his sort of story arc at Spurs. You have Pedro Porro, who was quickly criticized by Tim Sherwood, but now all of a sudden, athletic articles are being released how he's actually well cemented into the squad. You have Kulusevski, who is a Juve reject. You have also as well, I think, Bentancur, who was also, I think, in that Juve reject sort of pile. Do you feel like, Sean, maybe we do write off players a bit too soon here at Spurs? Or is this something, maybe that just happens in general in football?
Well, I think it happens in general in life. At the moment, I feel like the generations that have grown up with Netflix on the on-demand economy, right? Like you want some food, but you can't be bothered to cook it yourself. You get a takeaway, you get it delivered to your house in 20 minutes. You get your mum's birthday present or your dad's birthday present, and you forget. And the day before, you're annoyed if Amazon can't get it to you by 7 o'clock the next morning. If you're in London and you miss a subway and miss a tube, and you look up and there's more than 3 minutes until the next one, you're absolutely furious. I think that generally speaking, the world has pivoted to this absolutely everything immediately right now, and expectations are consequently raised to unreasonable levels. At Tottenham specifically, I think that you could stretch the argument towards not just the players performing, but when it comes to expectations around success on the pitch as well as a team. I think there are I would say that there are somewhat unreasonable expectations in the eyes of some fans. It's totally fine to demand it. And when it comes to players, look, I do think we wrote off Emerson Royale too quickly. Decky was obviously hit the ground running, and he was immediately elevated to like a GOAT status.
But if you just quickly, Sean, just where I'm coming with the Decky one. Do you remember that first game where he came off the bench and people, were quickly like, "Oh, he's too slow. He's too clunky. That sort of thing." And I remember, quickly, maybe I'm being too, harsh or something. Yeah,
I think the most recent Pedro Porro, right? Like, I think I'm not sure if the
Right.
Leicester game was debut. I think it might have been, and I was at that game with Ben, and yeah, look, he looked absolutely awful, and a lot of people were suddenly going, "Oh God, another 40 million down the Swanee." But ultimately, like, you have to give. Like, it's a results business, right? So you do need to, like, you can't just wait forever for players or for whatever things to happen. You absolutely do have to expect these players to figure out a way to acclimate, figure out a way to get the best out of themselves. But generally speaking, I do think that there is a little bit too much of an impatience with Tottenham fans around players, especially when they're young and they maybe move to the new league, don't speak the language, don't understand the football, don't know their teammates or their managers' expectations. So yes, in a nutshell, mate, there is. As a consequence of the way that it works right now, I think that Tottenham fans are too demanding for things too quickly.
And to you, Sim, I imagine you hear plenty of different opinions, regarding certain players and whatnot. And do you feel like you agree with this sort of question that maybe we are too quick to write off certain players, or do you think maybe this is, just how it is, maybe in general?
I think Sean's absolutely spot on when he talks about the modern football fan and how social media treats footballers and how they're under scrutiny from very early on. I think from Tottenham, I think it's heightened a bit, only for a few reasons. Probably because we spent big money before, and a lot of players who spent big money have flopped. So I think Tottenham are kind of skeptical. Tottenham fans are very skeptical in a way. Although we want our club to spend big money and we want to have big signings, when they all of a sudden have come in and they take a bit of time to settle or don't put in immediate amazing performances, we're always right. Oh, we've signed another dud. We've spent big money on another player. I also think a lot of fans as well are hypercritical on new signings sometimes because it's another way to beat the ownership in a way. I feel like because the owners are under a lot of scrutiny, all of a sudden it's almost like I saw this a lot with Porro. Like whenever Porro was like making mistakes or does something bad, the narrative starts, "Oh, Levy signed another dud. Levy's done another bad signing," and all of a sudden it's like they're quick to jump on it just to have another go of the ownership. I think that's probably another side to it, and I think that
That's an interesting angle. That's an interesting angle where it's like people don't really trust the recruitment. So when they see maybe one miss kick, they see even one defensive error, they are quick to assume that he might just be on the long list of Clinton and G's and Kudu's and even Lo Celso's, right? Who have maybe looked like they were going to be really good, but end up maybe just not even working out for whatever reason it may be. So I could see that's an interesting angle, I think, to it, to be fair, actually. And that could be a huge part of it.
Yeah, and I think we should be more patient, especially with someone like Porro, who's very young, coming from a new league, new system. The whole team, like, clearly there's problems with there's not just problems like tactically and whatever with the team, but like culturally and how the team are getting on with each other and things like that. There are issues. He's walked into a bit of a shit show, and obviously every mistake is getting heightened right now. But the guy clearly shows quality. I think clearly on the ball, his crossing ability is the best we've seen for right back probably since Trippier, to be honest, from what I've seen. And I think once we get a proper structure in our team, he's going to fly. I'm really sure of it. But for sure, we're very quick to write players off, and we're very quick to criticize. And I'm hoping that the last few years, ever since Pochettino has left, to be honest, it's not been a good environment, I feel, for a lot of the times for new signings to come and bed in. I think it's been a very bad for new signings. So I'm hoping once we get a new manager who's going to have positive tactics in, I think a lot of the players hopefully will look a lot better than even the new players than they are now.
Yeah. Dara, I feel like, we're all guilty of this, though, what I'm kind of saying, right? We might all be guilty of maybe writing off a player too quick or making a judgment too soon. What do you kind of maybe think of this question? Like Pedro Porro is a good example. Emerson is a crazy, I think, sort of, like I said, story arc of an example. What do you kind of make of maybe sort of the new players that have been brought in that maybe at first glance maybe don't exactly look like they're settling in right away, but then all of a sudden 2 weeks later we're getting Pedro Porro articles how he's already leading the squad, he's leading the prison.
Yeah, no, it's a funny one really, because I think within Spurs over the last few years, I totally agree with what the lads have been saying, that there's definitely a culture at the club of mistrust from the top down. I think from a lot of the players that we signed while Pochettino was kind of trying to rebuild in 2019. A lot of those players ended up not being what we expected them to be, the likes of Ndombele, the likes of Lo Celso, even the likes of Reguilon, stuff like that. So I think the fans have grown maybe maybe overly frustrated with the players we brought in for big money, and they've not turned out as well. So I think nearly there's almost in the back of our minds an insecurity there that kind of says, "Oh, sure, he's going to be another one," you know. And I think what we should have learned from the past, from Sissoko especially, I thought his arc from one of the worst players we had seen to an absolute midfield general for a couple of seasons, like that was crazy. And I think Emerson is on that road now. I don't think he's quite, I don't think we're quite still certain of what he can do, but he's definitely showing signs that there's a player there that we should have, had a little bit more faith in. And Porro again is another superb example of a player that's, that was kind of dismissed from the off go. And I think another one that's been getting a lot of harsh treatment is Richarlison, probably because he knew the league. You would have expected him to hit the ground running a bit quicker, but that's not always the way things work. And as the lads have been saying, like it hasn't been the easiest time to be settling into this Spurs squad. I mean, it's in absolute disarray at the moment, as we know. I mean, 3 managers in 1 season, conflicting reports about players leaving, about managers leaving, everything like that. It's been a completely unsettling season. So to expect any player to be playing at the top of his game is quite unrealistic, to be honest. And I know players have been coming out like HOJBJERG and recently saying like that's not really an excuse, and it's not really an excuse for players to drop the ball. But at the back, if the culture of the club isn't right, it is going to play a part. And anyone who's played competitive sport before will know that if there's something rotten going on at the club, it affects the team. So unfortunately, that's where we're at. And the lads are absolutely right. It's an absolute monopoly at the moment. So you have to expect that we do want results quick. Whether that's fair or not, it isn't fair, really, to be honest. But
is there a bit of like saviorism kind of put on these guys? Like you feel like they kind of like they're being brought in, right, to sort of like Pedro Porro, right, was supposed to relieve us of Doherty, Emerson, Jed Spence, all these kind of guys that we thought maybe weren't good enough, and then he doesn't put in a worldy hat trick of a performance or something in his first game, and then immediately we're doomed, now.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Exactly. It's like I think all football fans are definitely guilty of having extremist views after maybe 1 or 2 games where we think this lad is terrible or that lad is amazing, and then all of a sudden the amazing guy suddenly is having a poor run of form. You think, oh, I was wrong about him, when maybe it's just a run of form, and I think we're definitely guilty of having very extreme views, whether they're extremely good or extremely bad. And I think you need to take a step back from time to time and just look at the bigger picture, which is quite hard to see when you're getting, say, like that Newcastle result. It's hard to say, oh, like he's a top player when you can see he was getting rinsed. I'm talking Porro here. But then in the next couple of games, he's been brilliant, getting that goal against United and that superb assist at the weekend. He looked like a new player, Porro in particular, especially given that license with Emerson behind him. I think he looked like a new player. So, I mean, just judging a player off one bad performance is, it's not on really, is it?
Is it okay though, Dara, to just quickly, is it okay, Dara, if I didn't like Richarlison before he arrived? I wasn't writing him off. I just never liked him in the first place. Is that okay?
That's almost before too soon.
Yeah, at least you're consistent. That's fine.
Yeah, perfect.
From the get-go. Good question, Sean. Exactly right. You have to put your foundations right away before he even signs, before he even holds. Yeah, well done. Dave, would you add anything to maybe this conversation, or should we move on to maybe the Skippy conversation, as Paul Marks wants to get into?
Yeah, no, we'll move on to the skip. I don't think there's not much more I can really say that the boys haven't said. Just that, look, these players have been tasked with coming in here, to sort of save the situation. And I would actually argue that the recruitment is getting better. Maybe people should actually trust in the recruitment a little bit more. You look at you take out Hugo Lloris and Eric Dyer, people who've been here for a long time. You look at a lot of that back line over the weekend. Pedro Porro, Paratici signing. Fraser Forrester, Paratici signing. Romero, Paratici signing. Emerson, Paratici signing. The only one that wasn't was Ben Davies, and he was useless on the ball anyway. And he's going to need to be upgraded if we're better in possession next year. So for me, I would argue that the signings, that we are improving on the situation from maybe a lot of the Steve Hitchens signings. And I would say to Spurs fans, whoever the next director of football is give the guy a chance, let him get his feet in under the desk, and maybe let's start to trust the recruitment a little bit more, because it is improving.
I think part of it really is the saviorism sort of thing. Like, we just want these guys to come in and relieve us of the pain of maybe the previous players that are in that sort of position, whether it be center back, winger, midfield, wing back. There are so many problem areas in the squad. And so whoever sort of comes in is coming in with a lot of pressure to sort of do well and to kind of, get on the ground. We want him to hit the ground running because we're kind of desperate for him to do so. And I think the other part too was what either Sim or Sean said in the point of, I think it's Sean's right, where it's like, things are now, we have less patience than before, but also, right, I think it's the long list of failed signings from either Hitchin and even people like Paul Mitchell who have done a great job, still signed the Clinton NGs and the Nkudus and whatnot of the world. And even Paratici, of course, is going to have his duds too. And it sort of is the case, I think, that Spurs fans are just, we're a little skeptical, maybe whoever gets, brought in, if they're not hitting the ground running either. It's kind of a lot of different.
The thing is, though, Jack, it's very hard to hit the ground running when you've got Moosehead, out of position, left, right, and centre. You got Lloris spilling balls left, right, and centre. It's very hard for new signings to come in and salvage that situation. So, just get rid of the old and let's keep bringing in the new.
Yeah. Skippy here is being brought up by the likes of Paul Markey. I knew he would have an interesting, he's been fighting this lone battle, and it's definitely an unpopular opinion that could be featured on the We Are Tom TV. I love the unpopular opinions. And he says, getting more like the squad, Dave, late to the ball every single time. Lol, I think he might be referring to the likes of Skippy, Dave. And we're asking about maybe whether the midfield partnership just, is it really worth pursuing anymore, right? Can you really go for the rest of the season with Skipp and HOJBJERG? Because when we saw the big improvement with Dyer being dropped, you can then kind of look to the midfield. Like, how can we improve there? Do you bring Bissouma back in? Do you maybe consider dropping a Skipp? And, Paul Markey's been, a long time, maybe a bit of a Skipp denier, you could say, a bit of a Skipp skeptic.
Well, he also goes on here to say, saying it all season, that Skipp is championship standard. So strong words there from Paul Markey. Look, when it comes to Ollie Skipp, I've highlighted this before. I think there are elements to his game that he needs to improve, because if Bentancur comes back November and he hits the ground running, Bissouma comes back, Skipp will find himself back down the pecking order very, very quickly, in my opinion. I think his biggest weakness is actually on the ball. Off the ball, I think he's fine. He gives a lot of energy, he gets stuck in, he works hard. But a lot of times since he's come into this team on the ball, I found him wanting, I found him lacking a lot of times. And you've seen this sort of similar with Harry Rinks, right? He sort of never really developed that real passing side to his game, or never really showed it was all safe and everything else like that. And look what ended up happening to his career at 25, 26. He sort of has to go out there and really make a name for himself. But I really don't want that to happen to someone like Ollie Skipp, because this is a guy that Pochettino said would be a future Tottenham captain. Jose Mourinho also said it. So there's definitely a player in there. And I'm just trying to work out whether the long-term injury he had has sort of affected his growth as a player, whether he's sort of struggling to recapture that form maybe he had before that, or whether the guy is limited. However, I would urge him, he does need to work on other sides of his game if he really wants to stay at Tottenham Hotspur and have that career that many people predict. I think at the minute, I think we are overhyping Skipp. And for me, the reason why I would drop Skipp more than a HOJBJERG is because HOJBJERG, he's had his best output in terms of goals and assists this season. He's had a really good, consistent campaign up until really when Bentancur got injured. I think Bentancur is probably the biggest talking point here. He's the biggest miss out of that midfield with how composed he is on the ball. And, that sort of shows the level where Skipp really sort of needs to get to if he wants to stay in this team, especially going forward, because I've no doubt we're going to sign more midfielders. I don't understand personally why Papa Matt Sarr isn't given a game. I think that Skipp and Sarr, they put in an unbelievable performance out in the San Siro. But Sarr was much better on the ball. Sarr was progressing the ball. Sarr was knocking it out to the right, to the left, while also offering what Skipp does, which is getting stuck in, plenty of energy, this, that, and the other. So I would like to see HOJBJERG and Sarr in the midfield to the end of the season, because at the Palace game, I think look, first of all, we stopped the rot at the back. That was absolutely crucial. But we also had a lot more possession than what we're used to having at Tottenham Hotspur this season. And there becomes a problem then with Skipp and HOJBJERG, because the two of them are very similar. I'd argue HOJBJERG's a bit better on the ball, but they're sort of similar in how they're playing. You could see it against Palace. We lacked that passing between the lines. We lacked that long ball over top to play people on behind, and they just didn't have it. It was very passive. And ultimately, we ended up running into the same problem that we did at the back end of the last season when Conte was in charge with Brighton and Brentford, where we sort of team set up, put every man behind the ball, and we found it hard to break them down. So going forward, if we do keep that back line and we improve it, and we do keep the amount of possession that we had against Palace, you need better in there. You need people that have that creative pass, that can break them lines, play the true balls, get the ball, hold it up on the composure. And Skipp, I think there's a lot more developing that he needs to do, to be honest with you. And that's not a dig. That's just me wanting to see him improve.
I mean, I mentioned the unpopular opinions section. Sim, what are your thoughts on what Dave and Paul Markey have brought up here? I mean, level
Definitely
of unpopular opinion. What do you think?
Definitely would be unpopular on our channel. I can guarantee you that. Look, when it comes to Ollie Skipp, I agree, with Dave, that he's still got a lot of learning to do. And you've got to remember how young he is. He's still 22 years of age. He only broke into the first team at the beginning of last season, where he started the season really strongly, then had that horrific injury where it seemed to be never ending when he would come back. He only really came back properly midway through this season, and it's been very, very stop-start. And you got to remember as well, when you point to that Milan game, he started that game, then went on a really good run of form. He played a really good game against West Ham. He scored a great goal against Chelsea, and he was putting in some really good performances. I agree, as of late, they haven't maybe been at the same standard, albeit I did think maybe in the Anfield game, I think he maybe improved a bit. And I think against Crystal Palace, he was okay as well. I do think that on the ball, when you're comparing him to someone like Bentancur, which is the standard, I guess, we've set in our central midfield, Bentancur's another level to Ollie Skipp right now. There's no shame in saying that. Bentancur is the what he should be aspiring to get to when it comes to on the ball, and I don't think that Ollie Skipp can compare when it comes to his first touch, his passing range, things like that. I don't think he's of the class of someone like Bentancur yet, but I still think he's got so much learning to do. He's still very young. I think he's got the right mentality. I think he's looking to improve every single day. I think you can see that he's a very mature player for his age. And I do think that injury definitely affected him. And I think because he's been getting so talked up by a lot of previous other managers saying he's going to be a future captain, he's put a lot of pressure on him. And I think he's doing okay. Honestly, I don't think he's doing badly. I think that he's still, because he's still developing, I still think a lot of his flaws in his game still need to be ironed out. And yeah, I don't think he's of the level of HOJBJERG and Bentancur right now, but he's still very young. I think he's got so much time on his side. And I've got no problem with how he's performing massively. I want him to be better. And we are suffering because of the lack of Bentancur right now, but I'm willing to be patient with him. And because of that injury, that definitely hampered him 100%. He was flying before that injury. He really was. He was playing so well. I think he was taking a lot of responsibility as well. He was one of our main players, like Nuno and Conte in the early stages of Conte. They are heavily relying on him before Bentancur came in. And he was he was playing every single game. Now he's got other competition. But I really believe that he's got ability. I do believe he's got a long-term future at Tottenham. Right now, he's not maybe playing at his best, but I think even recently we've seen really strong performances from Ollie Skipp. And I just think, look, young players are going to go through good periods and bad periods. And I think right now is maybe not his best period, but I'm pretty sure that I think he'll probably see this season as a bit of a success, considering him coming back from that injury, to be honest.
Yeah. Dave, though, Sean, I mean, Skippy, it's a difficult one because I feel like Bissouma is now coming back from injury, if I'm not mistaken. Sarr is, sitting on the bench waiting for his chance. And after that clean sheet, a lot of people want to look to what probably the next big problem area is, and it's the midfield. What do you think? Skipp and HOJBJERG, do you break that up?
Yeah, look, for me, I agree with what everyone said already. There's nothing to disagree with. What I would say is, I think that Skippy was rushed in. Like, you have to. I think we're judging him right now because he's playing in the first team every week in, week out. I think he's been rushed way ahead of schedule. He was never supposed to be, at this stage of his career, supposed to be a regular starter. We are supposed to have Bentancur and Bissouma to utilize. Okay, you can get injuries to, occasional injuries to both, or one goes out for a while or whatever. But we have been at bare bones in the midfield. HOJBJERG, is playing every single minute of every
Another
single game.
season where he's playing every game.
Yeah, I think he's missed a grand total of about 30 seconds of football over the last 2 seasons, and like that, like the consequence of that has indirect collateral damage on Skippy, right? If he's not always in the right position to do the things that he does because he's exhausted, or he puts a bad pass out, then sometimes Skippy's going to be the fall guy because he consequently has to try and there's a million different variables and nuance to how to look at it. But for me personally, like, I'm with Sim, like, you don't sell Skip, and I'm not coming at this from a place of like he's one of our own, or even from the homegrown argument. Like, I think that Skippy and Sarr should absolutely stay at Tottenham, absolutely be injected into games when necessary, but allow them to develop at their own time. And I think that Skippy's just been almost unfortunate, and that there's a hell of a lot of responsibility on him in a team that isn't performing well generally, with the defense that have been making mistakes. And I just think it's all come a little bit too soon for him. And I agree that the injury coming back from that he's had a few good games and a few bad games, etc. So I think you just got to be patient with him. And this goes back to the first question, right? Expectations over patience.
Right.
I think that Ollie Skipp should be a guy that comes in and plays 25% of games in a season, or gets minutes here and there. He shouldn't be a guy that we should be looking for to be, the mainstay of the group. But because of injuries to Bissouma and Bentancur, it's been forced upon him. And I don't think he's done a bad job. I think on some games, I think he's absolutely looks brilliant. Looks like he's got a really high ceiling. But on other games, he sometimes he gets overwhelmed. So, but that's natural for someone that's just making his way in the league. I think he'll be a very fine player, but we shouldn't expect too much from him too soon.
It's an interesting one where you said, like, if you're playing every game like how he is, right, you then start to maybe more hyper analyze kind of people, and kind of maybe look at more of the flaws and things like that. It's a good point, especially. But Dara, I mean, what do you say? HOJBJERG, Skipp, if we were to drop one of them for the likes of a Sarr or a Bissouma, would we be a lot better in midfield? I think that's an interesting question. Like, as much as we want to probably defend both of them, if one of them were dropped for Bissouma or Sarr next week against Aston Villa, would we be a better team in your opinion?
I don't really think that we would be an overall better team with the likes of Sarr, Bissouma. I wasn't convinced by, and again, this goes back to the expectations thing, but I wasn't convinced anyway at the start of the season by Bissouma's original performances, and I totally accept that that's because he was betting into the team. He was playing in a 2 when he was used to playing a 3 at Brighton. I do accept that wholeheartedly. But if we're going to stick with playing this system and Bissouma is just going to come in and play in a 2 with, say, HOJBJERG, I wouldn't be overly convinced that he'd be doing a better job than Skipp. I think Skipp knows the position really well. I think he provides a huge amount of energy. But I do accept Dave's point 100% that I thought, and I have thought for a while, that Skipp and HOJBJERG long term, it's not going to be the answer, I don't think. So I definitely wouldn't be opposed to maybe leaving Skipp out of a game, starting Sarr 100%. I think Sarr has been given a little bit of a raw deal in terms of the amount of minutes he's gotten this season. I think he should have gotten a lot more, even for the last 20 minutes of a game when we've found wanting. I don't see why he's been used for the last 2 and 3 minutes. It just seems a bit pointless. I don't understand that at all. But I don't fully feel this we'd be any better off long term with Sarr in there over Skipp at the moment. I think Skipp has that little bit more experience and positional awareness maybe over Sarr at the minute. I think Skipp has a lot to work on in his game, and I think we're going to have to accept that. It could be a long road for Skipp in terms of trying to build himself as a more all-round midfielder, because I suppose you saw what happened to Delhi over the years, in that he didn't really develop his game, and he couldn't really facilitate that central attacking midfield role when we needed him to. He was too used to playing as the second striker almost to Kane, and that pretty much ruined his career. So players constantly need to develop and grow and find new ways of staying in the team, because at the moment, Skip and HOJBJERG, they don't complement each other well at all. And I don't know how many times this season we've said how much we've missed having the likes of an Eriksson in there to try and spray the ball around, to find that killer pass. We've no player in the entire team. I know Bentancur is kind of a box to box. Even himself, he wouldn't be one to be finding that killer pass. But I'd love to know in the future what our plan is with regards to, if we're going to go to a 3 in midfield, which, does that mean we're going to go to a 4 at the back? And what does that mean for our wing backs? So there's a lot for whoever is going to be the next manager to try and decipher, what benefits the club going forward. Because I think a lot of our creativity at the moment is coming from out wide, and that's because we've nothing through the middle to provide that creativity. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but I would definitely stick by Skip in terms of keeping him developing. And I agree with what Sean said there. There's a lot of pressure on a young man's shoulders there. I know 22, you should be, maturing, and I think he is maturing. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure on him at the moment. Again, I think we talked about saviorism.
Someone needs to go though. Like, so Darius, someone definitely, like, for me, like, even if you're going to a back 4, I think we've got too many players that are they're very different, just slight variations on the same kind of player. None of them are creative enough, and none of them are proper monster number 6s. At the moment, you're asking Ollie Skipp to play as a monster number 6 and protect the back line, and he's not good enough in that role. I'm not entirely sure what role he plays, but I could make the same argument for HOJBJERG. I could make the same argument for Bissouma when he's fit, if he's fit. And you could even make the same argument for Bentancur. Like, I don't really know what role... I like Bentancur's obviously head and shoulders. Sarr, again, the same. Like, they're all different versions of the same. We don't have really specialists in any one position. And if you look at
holding midfielder FC, says Tom.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at the teams above us, the teams we're trying to compete with, they all have like a creative player that's supposed to be there, or at least one creative player that's supposed to be the locksmith. And they all have someone who's the guy who's just there to tidy up and protect the back 4. And I don't think in the 5 or 6 midfielders that we have anyone that is a specialist in any one role. And so for me, whoever it is, the manager has to make a decision and liquidate one of them, and then bring at least one of them, and then bring in someone who is either a monster number 6, which I would love to see, and also someone who can play more creative. But I'd love to see a Madison brought in, and I'd love to see a Ugarte brought in. And if you could do that, then you could liquidate HOJBJERG, or you could liquidate one of the others,
Also, though, in the context of this weekend, though, Sean, just quickly, I mean, we saw the benefit of dropping a Dyer and making a big call. Like we said at the time, it was a huge call to do that and to switch up the formation. Could Ryan Mason follow up what already was a big call from last week with another one by dropping a Skip or a HOJBJERG in place of somebody else, maybe, and going for something different against Aston Villa, or maybe even going for extra midfielders?
I think Aston Villa away is a different prospect to Crystal Palace at home. Aston Villa's form right now, like, I feel like you have to, like, experimenting against Palace is brave, and I applaud him for it, and I think it worked out. But I don't know, against
would
Aston
it be an
Villa,
experiment to drop Skip or HOJBJERG? That would just be too much change.
For who? For Pape Sarr?
For Pape Sarr, potentially a fit Bissouma.
Is Bissouma fit?
Because he was on the bench.
Yeah, he's on the bench. He was on the bench, Bissouma.
Well, that'd be interesting. I'd love to see Bissouma get some minutes before the end of the season. I'd love to see that, But it is a risk because we are still fighting for 6th at the moment. So
I think a lot of the problems our midfield are having at the moment is not just their performance level, but I do think the structure of the 3-4-3, how we play it, doesn't lend to them getting a lot of possession on the ball and because a lot of the time they're up against 3 central midfielders, they're struggling to find that kind of space to kind of get on the ball and dictate the game. You saw even on the weekend, the only way we got the ball to our front 3 was through Romero, really. We couldn't really get the ball to Skip and HOJBJERG. We literally had to go over them to get the ball to the front 3 because Schlupp, Eze and Decore were just absolutely hounding them. They had absolutely no space. I do think once we change up the system, hopefully next season, it may probably add an extra midfield body in there. It's going to make it a lot easier for these midfield players to get on the ball, have options closer to them, and not look overrun all the time. So I do think that's part of the problem at the moment, why maybe they're struggling a bit.
Does it always have to be an extra guy in midfield, though? Because I think part of the reason, though, is also maybe you see how maybe Skip always gets picked. He seems to not know when there's a man on or there's somebody kind of, approaching him. HOJBJERG now, with maybe the fact that he's playing next to Skip, seems very reluctant sometimes to sort of like pick up the ball in the half turn and sort of kind of, surge upfield. What do you make of that? Because I think as much as, an extra man in midfield would help us, that does mean then losing an extra attacker just to sort of like accommodate for the fact that maybe Skip and HOJBJERG just simply aren't either confident enough or either good enough to, basically do some of the simple things of just, turning upfield, because every midfield is going to get pressed and you will get outnumbered. And it's also up to them, I think, even when they are outnumbered, to sort of find a bit of ingenuity, be creative and sort of also, right, just be daring. Like, don't always make these sideways passes. Like, be prepared to try something a bit different, The
better you are on the ball, the less likely you are to be pressed on the ball. That's just the reality of it. You look, our midfield problem, it's not just the midfielders. The fact that the attackers don't really put any pressure on the ball as well, it allows the opposition to sort of get people to drop into these spaces. And that's why you see us, that's why it's such a big issue with us being outnumbered. But like, we've seen at Palace, Palace was a glimpse into what's coming next season in terms of us hopefully having a lot more possession and on the ball. And we are going to have to be better in that department. And that's just facts of it. Because if not, you're going to run into a lot more of what we've seen against Crystal Palace, where it's sort of like, just not enough going forward, nowhere near it. And you're going to rely on certain players. The thing is with Skip as well, just quickly, the guy's 22. He's near enough a man. He is a man, actually. And it's sort of 23, 24 is when your sort of potential sort of levels out, and you're never really going to become a player much more above that potential. So Skip right now, he's got a lot of work to do over the next 2 years. Like, we say he's a young guy. Look at Jude Bellingham. Look at Declan Rice. People like them, sort of midfielders in and around his age. Look at their skill set compared to Ollie Skip's. For me, I think the guy's got a lot of work to do. I really do.
Yeah, he's not their level though, is he?
Yeah,
Declan Rice is a £120 million player, but Jude Bellingham's a £150 million player. If you were to sell Ollie Skip tomorrow.
But if we're talking about a guy that has future plans to get into the England team, this, that, and the other, that's his competition. That's who he has to get with. We can't keep making these excuses for some of these guys. We've done it with Harry Winks for how long? And look what happened there. At some point, you just got to call a spade a spade. You just got to say, compared to what's out there, he's not good enough. Compared to what we already have in the Tottenham squad, he's not good enough. So for me,
you'd sell Skip ahead of HOJBJERG, would you? Would you sell Skip ahead of HOJBJERG?
See, it's a bit tricky because HOJBJERG's contract is up in 2 years, so you've sort of got a decision to make there anyway. But Dara, what do you think? Would you sell Skip ahead of HOJBJERG?
Yeah, you got to, yeah.
That's a tough question. I don't think I would. Now, that is a tough question.
Because you got to unclog this midfield. I think Sean brought it up, right? There are just so many players of the same type. You have to. It's a difficult conversation.
It is a difficult conversation. And I suppose if you're looking at rebuilding the squad completely, then I would probably go selling HOJBJERG ahead of Skip personally. And that's very marginal, just because I do believe Skip has a lot of defensive ability. I think he's braver. I think he has more potential to become a more specialized midfielder than HOJBJERG. He does need to work on his ability on the ball 100%. I do accept that HOJBJERG can have a killer pass, but I don't know how many times I find HOJBJERG quite frustrating, I'll be honest with you. I do think he is a good player that's made to look a lot worse because of the system we're playing at the moment. But I don't know going forward, would he be good enough in a 3 either, to be honest with you? Like, I would like to see next season Bissouma getting into that starting role somehow. I would like to see, as Sean said, a more specialized number 6 and then another creative midfielder getting in there. If we're going to play a 3 midfield, that's the way it's going to have to work. And I don't see HOJBJERG really facilitating any of those roles that well. Again, it's going to really depend on the manager that we bring in and what system he's going to play. But HOJBJERG, again, he's kind of one of those managers' favorites. He seems to kind of, really get on a manager's good side. Every manager has good things.
And he's always available.
Yeah, exactly. That is also very true. The man's a workhorse. Yeah. But I just think Skippy has that potential. Now, again, I do 100% take what Dave said. He said that he has so much work to do over the next couple of years to become that top midfielder. And maybe, again, we probably have to manage our expectations with Skippy. Like, he probably won't be a starter next season. We just need to upgrade the midfield in general, I think, and find players that are more suited to whatever system the manager's going to play next year.
Just on that, the reason I would sell Højbjerg ahead of Skipp is just because the quality level. Obviously, I think right now Højbjerg is a better player. So if you're looking at short term, you might say, yeah, I would rather sell Skipp ahead of Højbjerg. But I would be banking on the fact when Skipp gets to Højbjerg's age, he would be a better player. And not only that, because he's come through the academy and he loves Tottenham so much, and it means a lot to him. I think you've got a player there who is probably going to be loyal to you as well. And I do think the quality difference right now is definitely that gap is definitely achievable for Skipp to kind of squeeze that gap between Højbjerg and how the difference in quality right now. So I do think based on that, I would bank on the fact that I think Skipp could be as good a player or better than Højbjerg that when he hits Højbjerg's age. So I think I'd be banking on the long term.
Do you agree that a midfielder does need to go this summer, though, Sim? Because a lot of people look at the midfield even more so as a problem than the defense. It's in some people's eyes, it's just as bad, or it's as equal of a problem, or they kind of contribute to each other, right? And so if we feel like the midfield is also a problem, I mean, we have a lot of midfielders. It's not for a lack of midfielders. It's maybe for having too much of the same thing. So it's a difficult conversation, like I said.
I'd consider loaning like Sar out. Maybe get him playing week in, week out at a good level, and maybe that would really help his development. Bentancur is obviously not going to be back till November, and we don't know what level he's going to be back at as well. And as well, I feel like not only are we missing creative ability, I think we're missing real good technical passing ability in the squad as well. Because in the midfield, because I feel like Højbjerg, Skipp, Bissouma, they're all very good. They can all very decent on the ball, but none of them, I would say, have really great vision when it comes to long range passing, real creative passing, dictating play. You look at the teams around us. Not only do they have creative players like Odegaard, Kevin De Bruyne, and people like that, but I'm looking at Gundogan. I'm looking at he's not playing around us, but someone like Ruben Neves, someone like that who has real good passing ability. We're all the players in our midfield, their passing is good, but it's not anything in the amazing category.
Yeah, it's not exceptional to the.
It's not exceptional, and that's what I also think we're lacking. So we're lacking a number 10 and potentially a good technical passer as well midfield. So I guess on that front, unless we believe someone like Bentancur, Højbjerg can develop into that, I do think we should. I think if a new manager comes in and thinks we could do better, I would be open to selling one of them. Yeah.
Let me ask the whole panel one more question on Ollie Skipp. First of all, Paul Markey says at 22, you're a man and should cut it. If not, goodbye. Look, that's where I'm sort of at with it, Paul Markey. If you're not cutting the mustard and it's sort of like that potential has stagnated, for me, there's no point in keeping holding on to these players. This is what got us into this mess in the first place over the last few years. Holding on to players that have stagnated and hoping that they're going to turn into players that you once thought they were. It's been one of the largest problems over the last few years. And for me, I think we've just got to be smarter when it comes to this. But I want to ask everybody, if we bought Skipp, would we be having a different conversation about the guy if we spent money on him?
Yeah, of course.
Probably.
For sure. But just to the point that Paul Markey's making, right? I do think it's worth pointing out that players do mature at different stages. Like Jamie Vardy was still playing, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't he playing non-professional football at 22?
Mm-hmm.
And then went on to become one of the greatest late developers in world football, in the history of world football. So I feel like, I hear the argument that if you want to have the best, there's players around, and Dave, take your point on board that he's competing with Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham, etc. So these are the players we should be comparing him to. But I think we can all agree that he's not at that level. And so if you want to be cutthroat, if you don't see him getting to that level, and you want Tottenham to be at that level, then like you say, if you can't cut it, goodbye. But I think that it's unreasonable necessarily to say that if you haven't proven it by 22, then you're never going to prove it. I think that there's a long list of examples of players that were average or irrelevant at 22 that as they progressed, they became superstars.
I think even in our squad, you look at Bentancur, I think he's shown a level that he's never shown in his career, like in the
Correct.
past year or so.
I agree.
Like, I don't think he's even shown that level at Juventus or anything like that. And I think we should remember the path that Ollie Skip has been on. And when in the first team, when Paul Markey says he's championship level, the championship was too easy for him a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember, but he was the best, pretty much the best central midfielder in the championship. They as Norwich won the league easily. He was playing every single minute of every single game. Norwich fans absolutely loved him. They thought he was absolutely amazing. It was like he was so good that he came straight into our first team at the beginning of last season. And when he came into our first team, he was brilliant. He was really, he was probably our best player under Nuno. He was one of our most trusted players under Conte early on, until we had this really bad injury, which it was a weird one because it seemed to be a minor thing and it turned into something like really long term. He was out for like 6 months to a year with it, he kind of was suffering for it on and off. So I think we got to be a bit more patient than just because he's come back from this long term injury and he's still been a decent level, but maybe he's had some ups and downs. All of a sudden we're saying, okay, he's 22, he's not good enough. I think we have to remember the trajectory he's been on and not just throw him away because he's had some bad performances.
I heard all of that with Harry Winks, and look how that ended up panning out.
What did you hear with Harry Winks?
Injuries for Harry Winks, I've heard about, he's on an upward trajectory.
Harry Winks, you've got to remember, had an injury which he admitted himself he's never going to recover from. And if Ollie Skip's in that situation, that's different. I don't think I've heard that about Ollie Skip, but Harry Winks had a sustained period of a few years where he was underperforming. Like Skip, we're not even talking about a few months. We're talking about a few games where he's been up and down. Like I don't even think we're talking about a sustained period of form yet.
No, but what I'm saying is,
we can say that he's not good enough.
We need to be smarter around this situation. Like the fact that the mess we've been in is because we've held on to players for too long that never really truly developed. And we've got to start making these calls. Like Troy Parrott's another one, 21 years of age. You know what you're going to do with him as well. You've got to start making these calls. You've got to determine if guys are good enough or not.
But you would have let go of Harry Kane then, wouldn't you? When before he broke in, because he was 21 and he didn't show anything. So as you say, players develop at different ages. Harry Kane was a year younger than Skip when he broke into the Spurs team and then all of a sudden hit the ground running. I would say Ollie Skip did hit the ground running when he came to the first team. Kyle Walker, he was pretty average before.
He was on loan until he was 23, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think we signed him. Well, I think he broke into the Tottenham team about 22 or something like that. Like, it happens. And then you have people like Dele Alli who were unbelievable in his career for like 2 or 3 years, and then it burns out. And so people have different trajectories, and I don't think we can now right now say Ollie Skip. I don't think we can say we've hung on to him for too long. I think that's way too early to say that.
I kind of agree with you with the fact that it is, at the end of the day, a long injury that he's sustained, and he's only been maybe consistently playing for a few weeks now, and probably has been maybe leaving certain Spurs fans, a bit skeptical. Like, is he capable of improving enough in time to eventually have that sort of starting role in the team, or is he going to be basically some type of squad player? Because at this moment in time, we already have a lot of guys that are quite good that are kind of sitting on the bench. You have a Bissouma sitting on the bench. You could potentially have a HOJBJERG or a Bentancur sitting on the bench, and maybe Skip might end up being sort of surplus to needs, but he also occupies that very, very valuable homegrown spot. And we all love HOJBJERG. I'm a big HOJBJERG defender, but like Dave said too, I mean, 2 years left on that contract. Are you going to put all your faith, in his basket, with him to sort of continue to lead and continue to improve and I guess become sort of maybe potentially a captain at Spurs? I guess that would be a lot of faith in the likes of a big.
You could probably get good money for HOJBJERG though as well, couldn't you, Jack? Like there was rumors that a lot of the big teams were after him around Europe and that he's not a homegrown player. If you do get rid of Skippy and you keep HOJBJERG, you have to replace that homegrown somewhere else, which is going to cost you a lot more money. You could probably get 30 million quid for HOJBJERG. And if he's got 2 years left on his contract, it's not a bad option.
The problem with trying to sell these players is that, and apart from Premier League clubs, like when you look, even when you're talking about 30 million, like unless you're talking about
Europe is broke.
So you're literally trying to send him to the Premier League, unless one of the top European clubs come in for him. It's a big problem. Unless you want to loan him with an option to buy or something.
Paul Markey saying Sim just proved my point by saying Nuno. I think, is he referring to? like maybe that's how long ago it was. Maybe is when he was playing his best.
I think
Like,
maybe he's trying to say that Nuno was such a bad manager that he trusted Skip, and that's a problem. I don't know. Maybe that's what he's trying to say.
at the time, Skip, I mean, basically was going into
Mud.
he
Mud
was
sim.
basically the second best midfielder, I think, at the club. Like Højbjerg was the only defensive mid. Then we had, what was it, Winks, Ndombele, Lo Celso, and Skip, I think, was sort of the combination that we might have had at the time.
And you got to remember, Skip's also had managers who aren't really known for developing younger players and trying to and helping with their progression a lot. And like Jose and Conte, they kind of expect like younger players, I feel, to just be ready made, and they expect things of them. And that's maybe that's one of their flaws. And I think maybe under a manager who's going to help his development, I think hopefully it'll help him take his game on more.
Yeah.
Dara, I'm going to maybe get your sort of final thoughts on, the Skippy Højbjerg situation. I mean, midfielders as well. Who would you make your final decision on? I'm not sure if I got like a final decision from you.
Yeah,
I'm going to give me yours and I'm going to give mine.
I do think it would be a big mistake to get rid of Ali Skip. To be honest with you, I think it'd be a big mistake. For a number of reasons. To be honest with you, I would trust him to come off the bench and make a difference in a game where we are kind of clinging on and things like that. I think his energy and his drive and his passion for the club, I think it can be quite hard to replicate that in a player you're going to replace him with. I think also maybe he could become, I do think, a number 6 who could, like, if he develops his technical game a bit more, I do think he could be a number 6 for us. I think he's got the defensive side of his game pretty much down. It's when he's put into a position where he's in a number, like he's playing
in a 2.
Playing in a 2 midfield, he looks a lot worse than he is. And I think that probably goes for a lot of our team, to be honest. I think they're playing in positions that make them look not quite as good as they could be. But yeah, I think setting Skip at this stage would be a big mistake for a number of reasons, really. But yeah,
is the reason this is just a quick follow-up is the reason maybe it is a tough conversation is because there is including myself, a large Højbjerg army. The Højbjerg army is very strong and very powerful, and they don't want to sell their man. That could be
I know, and I do understand that as well. And I wouldn't be one that would think Højbjerg is a bad player or anything like that, which is why it is a difficult conversation, and which is why Pochettino said it so many years ago that this rebuild that we're going to go on is going to be painful. I would just hate for that to involve selling Skip at this stage. I think that would be a mistake, especially what Sim said there about how much he was loved at Norwich as well and how much he dominated. I know obviously that was Championship, completely different level altogether, but you can see what he can do in a team. Like if we were to sell Skip, for example, I would see him going to maybe a lower Premier League team, and I guarantee you he'd be one of their better players, which pretty much says it all, really. If we want to stay, even top 6 at the moment, I think we have to manage our expectations too. Like if we're expecting to be getting top 4 next season, is that realistic? It's definitely a hope, and it's definitely something we need to aspire to, but we do need to manage them as well. And we will need players in the squad that are good enough to come into games that are, when we get injuries like the likes of Bissouma and Bentancur. And I would like to think that I can trust Ali Skip in there. And, I think in a better system, I think you'd see a better Ali Skip, definitely.
Yeah. Interesting. I also just maybe I'm part of the Højbjerg army. I'm probably maybe one of Ali's many secretaries in that Højbjerg army, but I think it is a difficult conversation to be had about him, because if you are going to keep him, you probably then are looking at giving him maybe a new contract, like Dave said, since he only has about 2 years left really on it. And then that means probably giving him some type of promotion or some type of, solidified role in the squad, whether he would accept a squad role. I don't know if he would, because he likes to play every game. He likes to sort of be involved as much as possible. So would he accept maybe a role behind a Bissouma, a role behind a Bentancur and a James Maddison, or those type of players that could be coming in, or a Ugarte as well that could be coming in? Would he take a role behind them? I'm not sure. But then too, if Spurs were to give him that new contract, that would probably more likely mean they're giving him maybe a captaincy, giving him some sort of kind of established role in the team. And that means you're putting a lot of eggs in that Højbjerg basket and kind of assuming that Højbjerg is sort of one of the better ones out there to sort of, lead this, I guess this regeneration of a Spurs team. And I guess you have to have veterans in the side. You have to have guys with a lot of experience, and Højbjerg is one of them, but would you maybe trust someone else to do it? And Skippy as well. valuable player and also dramatically different age. You're talking about guys at two very different ends of their career, I think, too. But for me, I think I would loan out Skippy, though, next season and maybe keep HOJBJERG and see if HOJBJERG does improve yet again, because I think what people don't give him credit for, I think he improves every season, HOJBJERG, and maybe he's also gone under a bit of a bad spell, and that's probably because of him losing out on Bentancur, too. But I think I would loan out Skip and then keep HOJBJERG and see how that goes for us.
I just wanted to add, I'm not sitting here to say sell Skip at the end of this season. For me, he's got next year. And if he doesn't show anything more to his game next year, then you have to make the call. You can't keep holding on to them. You just can't do that. Like, there's been plenty of players across the Premier League over the last few years, young guys that have come out and they've shown more. Gibbs White at Nottingham Forest is showing more than what Ollie Skipp is showing at Tottenham. There's been plenty of examples. And for me, I think
he cost 65. Didn't he cost like 60 million quid?
It doesn't matter what they cost, Sean. This is the level he has to get to. That guy is offering more than what Ollie Skipp is offering in midfield. It doesn't matter the cost. It's the level that we need to get to if we want to be successful at Tottenham. And that's the level he needs to get to if he wants to get into the England team one day. You're forgetting this is a guy that played in the England team through all the age groups. And he's going to end up losing out if he really doesn't develop his game like other players in his position have developed. So for me, I'll give him next season. And if he doesn't develop beyond then, and if he doesn't show too much, then for me, you've got to make the call. You've got to just accept that the guy's not going to develop. As much as we want him to be homegrown, Tottenham lad, this, that, and the other. Sometimes if a player doesn't develop, you've got to make the call. We cannot afford to keep hanging on to guys if they're not good enough, if they're not for this level, just because they're Tottenham boys. You can't do that anymore.
I'm just, the last thing I say on it though is I don't think he hit the intentions are for him to be a first teamer for Tottenham at the moment. Like, I think he's there because of under duress, because of consequences elsewhere, and like I think he's good enough. Like if you sell him, what do you get for him? 25 million quid, 20 million quid if someone takes a punt on him because he's homegrown or whatever else, right? But you can only have, like, Tottenham are not blessed with an abundance of world-class players. Like, at best you want to shift him to the bench. Like, yes, you'd, like I said in the first answer, yes, have him on for second string games for the Europa League, away or whatever, all that sort of thing. Utilize him where you need. But this season, he's been utilized as a first team player, and he shouldn't be. He's not ready. And we're judging him as a first team regular, but I don't think he is what we want to have. But he's okay. Like, you can't have we're nowhere near the level where we can be like where we can have £50 million, £60 million players in the first team and on the bench. We're so far from that scenario that for me right now, Ollie Skipp is good enough to keep around. Hopefully next season he is not a first team regular, and that we improve the first team, or the players that come back from injury step up. Bissouma needs to, I want to see more from Bissouma. I know he's been injured for the last half of the season, but in the first half of the season, he didn't hit the ground running at all. I have higher expectations from Bissouma than I do.
Version of himself.
Here's the thing, though.
So I'm just saying that Ollie Skipp for me is good enough to be someone that spends most of his time on the bench and then comes on when necessary. And
then how do you
that's
develop
the level that I expect. By sending.
We speak about Harry Kane. Harry Kane developed because he was constantly out on loan playing. We speak about Kyle Walker developed because he was constantly out on loan playing. He has to play game time to develop. If he's just sitting on the bench, he's not going to develop as a player one bit.
No, right, but if he's out on loan, who stays in his place and who gets dropped to the bench? I guess what you're making the argument is that we go out and buy better players to be in the first team and then relegate other people to the bench and then send Ollie Skipp out on loan. So are you saying that HOJBJERG stays, Skippy goes out on loan, or Sarr goes out on loan, and we go and buy two more midfielders?
What I'm saying is keep HOJBJERG and Skipp next season. I'd rather spend that money on a goalkeeper and a backline first and maybe bring in a Cam in here after that. But next season, if Skipp doesn't outperform HOJBJERG, you got to go. You can't keep this guy just on the bench. As a young guy, you need to be playing games. Everyone across football says it. As young kids, it's important to get out there and play games. If he's sitting on the bench, he ain't developing, and it's just wasting a year of his career. So, you put him in a dogfight. You tell him this summer, this is your season. You've got to make it happen this season. You've got to show improvements in the game. You've got to outperform other guys in your position, and then leave it up to him.
Also, though, Paul Markey adding, crap defensive mids don't change games from the bench. I would say, though, Paul, I feel like Bissouma has come on and been able to, I think they can. I think they can either lock up a game or see out a result and be able to help you out in that sort of regard. But would you say that they come on and dictate the game, dictate the tempo, be able to create tons of chances? Perhaps not, but sometimes you bring on a defensive mid for a different reason, unless I'm kind of maybe mistaking or getting wrong what you're sort of saying here. But Dave or anybody know what Paul maybe means by defensive mids coming on, and having impact? Because I think you do have to have them on the bench in some regard.
It just
depends.
I think it's just like
maybe you have too many on the bench.
If you're 2-0 up with 15 minutes to go, then a defensive mid bringing on defensive mid is exactly what you need. Like if you're 2-0 down, then it's not. Like it's down to the situation at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's what I would gather, and I think you have to have a healthy version of both. But maybe we just have too much of the same thing. So when we need a guy to create chances, all we have is defensive mids really to bring on and impact the game. I think that's where the issue lies. But only a few minutes until Champions League here, everybody. So let's plug some channels. Let's plug everything. Dara, I'm going to start with yourself. Well done on the debut. So yeah, Dave, sorry.
Just quickly, how the fuck did we get like 45 minutes out of Skip and HOJBJERG? Madness.
Credit to you, my man. Credit to you, Dave. You were the one leading the Skip unpopular opinion charge, Dave. You were the one in Paul Markey's camp, fighting the unpopular opinion. But legend. Dara, tell us about your Twitter, my man. I'm putting the link in again.
So, you can follow me there, guys, on Twitter, SpursViews_. If you want to hear me nattering on more about Skip and HOJBJERG and all the other guys as well. I do talk about the other guys sometimes as well. So if you want to hop on there and share some of my opinions on them, feel free to give us a follow, guys, and make sure you're following all these guys and subscribing if you haven't already, lads, because they put out some great stuff. So thanks a million for having me on again, lads. Really enjoyed it.
No, I'd love to have you back again, man. I'd love to have you back again if you're winning.
Brilliant, 100%.
Love it.
Let's get you back on, and we promise only Skip and HOJBJERG talk for at least 20 minutes next time you're on. Only 20 minutes. Shawnee, Spurs Talk Show, baby. What should we know about what's coming up on the channel? Any walks? Anything that's special that's coming up here?
Yeah, on Friday night I'm starting my first. It probably won't be, to be honest. It's probably be bang average. But on Friday night I'm starting my first. Back to you in the studio to dig yourself another hole. I am going to be doing my first, I'm going to start this regular weekly thing because I haven't done many live streams for a long time with work and stuff, but I am committing to doing more. And the first one is the first regular weekly slot is Friday night at 8 p.m. on the Spurs Talk Show. And I'm going to be, it's going to be this, 20 people in the group, but like four of them per week or whatever that are going to come on. And we'll just, same usual stuff, just talk about whatever's going on, talk about the games ahead, but do it with me being the host and asking irritating questions and, invoking arguments and debates. And I'll, making sure that everyone has their shameless hats on where they have to give like ridiculous opinions. I will be clipping all day long every day and then mudding them for the following next 6 days. It's going to be perfect. A lot of fun. Look forward to seeing you guys.
Can't give Sean control of mudding people. You can't do it. Can't happen. Oh God.
That's what's happening.
He's good at letting people land.
Yeah.
He'll let you land though. He'll let you land and
I'll
then
let you land.
Put you in the mud.
You'll land in the mud, in a mud bath, exactly.
Sim, I'm seeing an Emerson thumbnail, which is very tasty because he's my man, Mo. What's coming up on Weird Tom TV?
Yeah, look, we're going through all the news at the moment, all the speculation, obviously with the new manager search and everything that's going on with that at the moment. Obviously, we cover every game. We do daily Spurs content. So go check us out. We're Tottenham TV. Big up. Thanks, Dave, for having us on. And good to see you guys.
No, thank you for coming, lads. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate your time this evening. But Jacko, why don't you tell people what's coming up there before we end off and go and watch some glorious football being played?
Yep, Dave did some very hard work on the likes of HOJBJERG and as well Lee Dykes, everybody. So that's going to be coming out in due time. So maybe while you're watching the Champions League, give that a listen and see what Dave has to say about those two, because they are the ones that could potentially be working with Nagelsmann. And then tomorrow we have a podcast coming out as well, so check out that too. But everybody, enjoy the rest of your evening. Hit that like button, please, on the way out. And we'll be seeing you on the Harris Army we trust, Davo.
Come on, you Spurs.
In Ollie Skip we trust. In Ollie Skip we trust.
And Dorrington.
In Zinedine Saucepark we trust.
See you.